The Silent House at Black Hollow, 1888. Part 1. The Letter That Should Never Have Been Written. There are places in America that history remembers, and then there are places that history tried to forget. In the autumn of 1888, hidden deep among the quiet hills of northern Pennsylvania, there was a small town known as Black Hollow. It was not marked on every map. Most travelers never even knew it existed. The people who lived there rarely spoke to strangers. They kept their doors locked, their curtains closed, and after sunset, no one remained outside. For nearly 30 years, the town had protected a single secret. A secret no one dared to speak aloud. It was not a ghost. It was not a curse. And it was certainly not something supernatural. It was something far more dangerous. The truth. Everything began with a single letter. The envelope carried no return address, no official seal, only a few carefully written words in faded black ink. If the light still burns, do not knock on the door. No signature, no explanation, nothing more. Most people would have thrown it away, but one man could not ignore it. His name was Nathaniel Brooks, 29 years old, a newspaper reporter from Boston. He had spent years chasing strange stories across America. Most of them ended with ordinary answers: smugglers, fraud, family secrets. Nathaniel believed every mystery had a logical explanation until this letter arrived. He folded it carefully, placed it inside his coat, and boarded the westbound train. He believed he was traveling to investigate an old rumor. He had no idea he was walking toward the greatest mystery of his life. Part 2. The Train to Black Hollow. The train left Boston just before sunrise. A cold October wind swept across the platform. Nathaniel Brooks stood beside the last passenger carriage, holding the strange letter in one hand and a small leather notebook in the other. He had traveled across America before. Old mining towns, forgotten battlefields, abandoned settlements. Every mystery had eventually revealed a simple truth. That was exactly what he expected this time. As the train rolled west, the crowded cities slowly disappeared. Brick buildings became endless forests. The forests became lonely mountains. Hour after hour, the landscape grew quieter. The passengers became fewer. By late afternoon, only 6 people remained inside the carriage. No one spoke. Only the steady rhythm of the wheels echoed through the train. Click, clack, click, clack. Nathaniel opened the letter once again. He read the same sentence. If the light still burns, do not knock on the door. Nothing else. No name, no date, no explanation. Across the aisle, an elderly man quietly watched him. His beard was white. His coat looked older than the train itself. After several minutes, the old man finally spoke. That letter. Nathaniel looked up. I'm sorry. The old man nodded slowly. I've seen one like it before. Nathaniel felt his heartbeat quicken. You have? The old man stared out of the window. It was many years ago. What happened? The old man remained silent. Almost a full minute passed. Finally, he whispered only 4 words. He never came back. Nathaniel waited, but the old man said nothing more. The silence felt heavier than the conversation itself. Just before sunset, the train stopped at a tiny station. The old man stood, picked up his worn leather bag, and stepped onto the platform. Nathaniel hurried to the window. Sir. The old man turned only once. His face looked pale, almost frightened. If you reach Black Hollow, he called out, Never stay outside after dark. The whistle sounded. The train pulled away. Within seconds, the old man disappeared into the evening mist. Nathaniel sat back in his seat. For the first time, he wondered if this journey had been a mistake. Outside, the mountains grew darker. Far ahead, a thick blanket of fog slowly covered the tracks. The conductor walked through the carriage. He checked every ticket. When he reached Nathaniel, he paused. "You are getting off at Black Hollow?" "Yes." The conductor looked at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, "Are you certain?" Nathaniel smiled politely. "I've traveled to stranger places." The conductor did not smile back. Instead, he punched the ticket, returned it, and whispered, "I hope this isn't your last journey." Then he walked away. Nathaniel watched him disappear into the next carriage. Every person he had met today had offered the same warning, but none of them had explained why. Less than an hour remained before the train reached Black Hollow, and somehow the mystery had only become deeper. Part 3: Black Hollow. The train slowed, almost to a crawl. The iron wheels groaned against the cold rails. Outside, the evening sky had almost disappeared. A thick blanket of fog covered everything. The conductor stepped into the carriage. His voice was calm, but somehow it sounded uneasy. "Black Hollow," he announced. No one stood. No one reached for their luggage. Only Nathaniel Brooks rose from his seat. He picked up his leather bag, folded the mysterious letter, and placed it inside his coat. The train stopped. The station was smaller than he had imagined. A faded wooden sign read only 2 words, Black Hollow. His white paint had almost vanished. The platform was empty. No passengers waiting. No wagons. No horses. Only a cold wind moving through the silent station. Nathaniel stepped onto the platform. The train whistle echoed across the valley. For a brief moment, he thought about turning back. Then, the train pulled away. Its red lantern slowly disappeared into the fog. Within seconds, the sound of the wheels was gone. The silence returned. It was unlike any silence Nathaniel had ever known. No birds, no dogs barking, not even the sound of insects, only the wind and the distant creak of old wooden buildings. A small station office stood nearby. Its windows were dark. A single oil lamp burned beside the entrance. An elderly station master stepped outside. He looked at Nathaniel, then at the leather bag, then at the letter sticking slightly from Nathaniel's coat pocket. His expression changed. "You came because of the letter." It was not a question. Nathaniel nodded. "Yes." The old man lowered his eyes. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "I was hoping no one else would come." Nathaniel waited. "What is Black Hollow hiding?" The station master looked toward the distant hills. His face became pale. "I've lived here for 42 years, and I've learned one thing." Nathaniel leaned closer. The old man whispered, "Some questions should never be answered." Before Nathaniel could speak again, a church bell rang somewhere in the distance. Once, twice, 3 times. The station master suddenly looked frightened. "You must leave." Nathaniel frowned. "I've only just arrived." "I know." The old man took one slow step backward. "But the sun is setting." He quietly closed the office door, locked it, extinguished the oil lamp, and disappeared inside. Nathaniel stood alone, confused. The entire station had gone dark. Far across the valley, beyond the trees, high on a lonely hill, he noticed something. A single window, glowing with a warm golden light. It was the only light anywhere in Black Hollow. Nathaniel slowly reached into his coat. He unfolded the old letter. His eyes stopped on the final words. "If the light still burns." He looked back toward the hill. The light was still burning. Part 4, the innkeeper's warning. Nathaniel stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the lonely light above the hill. It never flickered. It never moved. Simply burned. The cold evening air grew heavier with every passing minute. He reached for his notebook. Carefully, he wrote only one sentence. "The light is real." Then he started walking. The narrow road led toward the center of Black Hollow. The town looked ordinary. Small wooden homes, a blacksmith shop, a church, a general store. Yet something felt terribly wrong. Every curtain was closed. Every front door was locked. Not a single child played outside. Not a single voice could be heard. It was as if the entire town had disappeared. Suddenly, a window opened, only a few inches. An elderly woman looked at Nathaniel. Her face carried no anger, only fear. "You should leave." Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. Nathaniel stopped. "I'm looking for the house on the hill." The woman immediately froze. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, without another word, she closed the window. The sound of the lock echoed across the empty street. Nathaniel continued walking. A few minutes later, he found the town's only inn. A weathered wooden sign swung gently in the wind. The Hollow Pine Inn. A warm fire burned inside. The smell of fresh bread filled the room. Only 3 people sat near the fireplace. None of them looked up. The innkeeper, a tall man in his 60s, stepped from behind the counter. "Good evening." Nathaniel smiled. "I'll need a room for a few nights." The innkeeper nodded. "You're the reporter." Nathaniel looked surprised. "How did you know?" The man glanced toward Nathaniel's coat. "The letter." Nathaniel slowly removed it. "So, you've seen one before?" The innkeeper sighed. "More than once." Nathaniel leaned closer. "Who sent it?" "I don't know." "Who lives in the house?" "I don't know." "Then what do you know?" The innkeeper remained silent. For a long moment, only the crackling fire filled the room. Finally, he spoke. "I know. Everyone who followed that letter walked to the house." Nathaniel waited, and the innkeeper looked directly into his eyes. None of them ever came back. The room fell silent. Even the 3 men by the fire stopped moving. One of them quietly stood, placed a few coins on the table, and left without saying a word. Nathaniel noticed something strange. Every person who walked out of the inn looked toward the hill, just once, only once, as if making certain the light was still there. Nathaniel turned toward the window. Far above the sleeping town, the lonely house remained hidden in the fog. Only one thing could still be seen, that single, golden light. Then, without warning, it slowly disappeared. Not because someone turned it off, but because something passed in front of the window. Nathaniel held his breath. Someone, or something, was inside the abandoned house. Part 5, the road to the hill. Nathaniel did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the distant window. Whatever had crossed the light had vanished. The golden glow returned, steady, silent, almost inviting. Behind him, the innkeeper quietly spoke. "You saw it." Nathaniel turned. "What was it?" The old man slowly shook his head. "I've stopped asking that question." Nathaniel stepped closer. "You've lived here for years. You must know something." The innkeeper looked toward the fireplace. His face had grown pale. "I know enough to stay away." A deep silence filled the room. Then, the old man reached beneath the counter. He placed an old town map on the wooden desk. Its edges were worn. Several places had been crossed out with black ink. Only one location was circled: the lonely house. Nathaniel unfolded the map. "There isn't a single road leading to it." "There used to be." "What happened?" The innkeeper answered without looking at him. "The town removed it." Nathaniel frowned. "A town doesn't erase a road without a reason." The old man finally looked up. "We had one." Nathaniel waited. "For 30 years. No one has walked that road." After sunset, the fire suddenly crackled. One of the burning logs collapsed. The sound echoed through the empty inn. Nathaniel noticed the 3 men who had been sitting near the fire were gone. He hadn't heard them leave. He hadn't even noticed them stand. The front door was still closed. A cold breeze touched the back of his neck. He slowly turned around. The door was now slightly open. Outside, the streets were empty, but something caught his attention. Fresh footprints. One clear line of footprints leading away from the inn toward the hill. Nathaniel pushed the door open. The night air was colder than before. He looked carefully at the ground. The footprints were fresh. Someone had passed only moments ago. He followed them with his eyes. They stretched through the silent street, past the church, across the old bridge, and disappeared into the fog. Always heading toward the house, Nathaniel knelt beside the first print. It was unusually deep, as if the person carrying that weight had been dragging something heavy. He stood, looked toward the hill once more. The golden light still burned. The innkeeper appeared quietly behind him. His voice was almost lost in the wind. "If you decide to follow those footprints," Nathaniel glanced back, "don't expect them to lead you home." Nathaniel looked down one last time. The footprints continued into the darkness. He took a slow breath, tightened his coat against the cold, and placed one foot on the forgotten road. For the first time, he was no longer chasing a story. He was following someone who had walked the same path only minutes before, into the silence and toward the only light in Black Hollow. Part 6: The Forgotten Road. Nathaniel stood at the edge of the old road. The wind had grown colder. Behind him, the warm lights of the inn seemed strangely distant. Ahead, only darkness. He took one slow breath, then began to walk. The narrow path curved gently around the hillside. On both sides, towering pine trees blocked the moonlight. The forest swallowed every sound. Even his own footsteps seemed quieter than they should have been. After several minutes, Nathaniel stopped. Something felt wrong. He looked back. The town had disappeared. Not because it was far away, because the fog had hidden everything behind him. For the first time that evening, he felt completely alone. He reached into his pocket and checked his watch. 8:43 p.m. He closed the cover and continued walking. The footprints were still there, deep, fresh, perfectly clear in the damp soil. Whoever had walked this road had done so recently. Then, the footprints suddenly ended. Nathaniel frowned. He searched the ground. Nothing. No return tracks. No turn into the forest. No sign of a struggle. The person had simply vanished from the road. He knelt beside the final footprint. The earth was undisturbed. It made no sense. A cold gust swept through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a loose branch cracked. Nathaniel quickly looked toward the sound. Nothing. Only darkness. He told himself there had to be a logical explanation. There always was. As he stood, his boot struck something buried beneath the fallen leaves. A small metal object. He picked it up. It was an old pocket watch. The silver case was scratched. Inside, an engraving caught his eye. Elias Turner. October 17, 1858. Nathaniel quietly repeated the name. Elias Turner. He opened his notebook. No such name appeared in his research. Yet someone had lost this watch on the very road that no one was supposed to use. He slipped the watch into his coat. A few steps later, he noticed another strange detail. The trees on both sides of the road were marked. Each trunk carried the same symbol, a small circle with a single line through its center. The marks were old, very old. Someone had carved them decades earlier. One tree could have been a coincidence. 10 trees could not. Nathaniel ran his fingers across one of the carvings. The edges had softened with age. Whatever the symbol meant, it had been important enough to mark the entire road. Then, a faint light appeared between the trees. Not the house, a lantern. Someone was walking through the forest. The light moved slowly, then stopped. Nathaniel held his breath. "Hello!" His voice echoed through the pines. No answer. The lantern remained perfectly still. He stepped off the road and walked toward it. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5. The light disappeared. He hurried forward. Nothing. No lantern. No footprints. No person. Only a rusted iron hook, hanging from the branch of an old pine tree. Swayed gently in the wind, Nathaniel looked around. His heartbeat was faster now. For the first time, he questioned his own eyes. Then, from somewhere higher on the hill, a church bell rang. 1, 2, 3 slow chimes. Nathaniel looked toward the sound. Far above the trees, the lonely house stood in complete silence. The single window still glowed with the same golden light. But now, the front door was slowly opening. Part 7, the door that opened by itself. Nathaniel did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the house. The front door had opened only a few inches, stayed that way, perfectly still. No one stepped outside. No shadow appeared. No voice called his name. The only sound was the wind moving through the pine trees. He checked his pocket watch. 8:57 p.m. Less than 15 minutes had passed since he had left the inn. Yet it felt as though he had been walking for hours. Nathaniel looked back toward the road. The fog had grown thicker. The path behind him had almost disappeared. For a brief moment, he considered turning around, returning to the inn, waiting until morning. That would have been the sensible choice. But sensible choices rarely uncovered great stories. He adjusted the strap of his leather bag and continued uphill. The closer he came, the stranger the house looked. From a distance, it had seemed ordinary. Now, he noticed details that should not have been possible. The porch was clean. Not a single fallen leaf rested on the wooden steps. The brass door handle shone in the moonlight. Someone had polished it recently, but every other part of the house looked abandoned. The roof sagged with age. The chimney had cracked. Several windows were broken. It was as though someone cared for only one thing, the front entrance. Nathaniel climbed the first step. The old wood creaked softly beneath his boots. He stopped, listening. Silence. He climbed another step, then another. At the top of the porch, he noticed something lying beside the door. A lantern. Its glass was clean. The oil inside was still warm. Nathaniel gently touched the metal handle. It had been used only moments ago. His heartbeat quickened. Someone had been standing here very recently. He slowly pushed the front door open. It moved without a sound. Inside, a narrow hallway stretched into darkness. The air smelled of old timber, dust, and something else. Fresh coffee. Nathaniel frowned. Coffee. Someone had brewed coffee in a house everyone claimed was abandoned. He lifted the lantern from the floor. The flame flickered gently. Its warm light revealed polished wooden floor. No dust, no cobwebs, no signs of neglect. Every picture frame on the wall had been removed. Only pale rectangles remained where they had once hung. He stepped inside. The floorboards groaned. The sound echoed through the empty house. Nathaniel waited. Nothing. Then, very softly, he heard it. Tick, tick, tick. A clock, somewhere upstairs. Keeping perfect time, he followed the sound. Each step brought him closer. The staircase curved into darkness. Halfway up, he froze. There was another sound. Not above him. Behind him, the front door was slowly closing. Without a single touch, Nathaniel spun around. The lantern shook slightly in his hand. The door reached the frame and stopped, not completely shut, just enough to leave a narrow crack, as if someone outside was quietly watching the house. From the darkness, Part 8, the room upstairs. Nathaniel did not chase the door. Instead, he stood perfectly still. His eyes remained fixed on the narrow opening. Cold air drifted into the hallway. The gap beneath the door never changed. If someone was standing outside, they were making no sound at all. After nearly a minute, Nathaniel slowly turned away. The ticking clock still echoed from upstairs. Tick, tick, tick. Each second sounded unnaturally loud. He tightened his grip on the lantern and climbed the staircase. Every step creaked beneath his boots. The old house answered with deep wooden groans. Halfway up, he stopped. The ticking had stopped. Complete silence. Nathaniel looked up. The second floor was almost hidden in darkness. Only a faint golden light slipped through a half-open door at the end of the hallway. It was the same light he had seen from the valley, the only light in all of Black Hollow. He reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched before him. 5 doors, 4 were closed. One remained slightly open. That was where the light came from. As he walked forward, he noticed framed nails in the walls. Pictures had once hung there. Every frame had been removed. Deliberately, only one picture remained. It was small. Its glass was cracked. Nathaniel lifted the lantern. The photograph showed 6 people standing in front of this very house. A husband, a wife, 3 young children, and 1 older gentleman. No names, no date, just one strange detail. Every face had faded with age, except one. The older gentleman's face remained perfectly clear. Nathaniel stared at it. Something about the man felt familiar. Then he remembered the silver pocket watch. He quickly removed it from his coat. Inside the lid, the name was still there. Elias Turner. Nathaniel looked back at the photograph. The older gentleman was holding that very same pocket watch. His heart skipped a beat. The watch had been found half a mile from the house. How had it returned to this photograph? A sudden gust of wind swept through the hallway. The photograph slipped from his hands. The glass shattered across the floor. Nathaniel knelt to pick it up. Beneath the broken frame, he found a folded piece of paper, yellow with age, hidden for decades. Carefully, he unfolded it. It was not a letter. It was a page torn from a diary. The handwriting was neat. The ink had faded. Yet one sentence could still be read clearly. If anyone finds this, never trust the bell. Nathaniel read the line again. Never trust the bell. At that exact moment, the church bell echoed across the valley. One slow chime, then another. Nathaniel instinctively looked out of the window. The church stood in complete darkness. No lights, no movement, no one pulling the rope. Yet the bell continued to ring. Then, from somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked. Not above him, not below him, just outside the room. Someone had taken a slow, careful step. Part 9: The Locked Study. Nathaniel slowly lowered the diary page. He did not speak. He barely breathed. The floorboard creaked again. Closer this time. Not the sharp crack of old timber, but the careful step of someone trying not to be heard. Nathaniel raised the lantern. Its warm light reached into the hallway. Nothing. The corridor was empty. 5 doors. Silent. Motionless. He stepped outside the room. The air felt colder than before. The old wooden floor stretched in both directions. He listened. No footsteps. No breathing. Only the distant whisper of the wind touching the roof. For a moment, he wondered if the house itself was playing tricks on his mind. Then he noticed something. A thin trail of dust crossed the hallway. Everywhere else, the floor was spotless. Someone had recently dragged something heavy from one room to another. Nathaniel followed the trail. It ended at the last door. Unlike the others, this one was locked. The brass handle was polished, almost new. He gently pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. Then, a faint sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It lasted only a few seconds. Then it stopped. Nathaniel slowly tried the handle. Locked. He examined the keyhole. There was no rust. Someone had used it recently. He reached into his leather bag. Inside, he carried a small set of lockpicks, a gift from a retired detective in Boston. Every reporter, the old man had once said, eventually finds a locked door. Nathaniel carefully inserted the first pick. The lock resisted. Then, a soft click. He pushed the door open. The room was smaller than he expected. A single desk stood beside the window. Bookshelves lined the walls. Every shelf was covered with thick dust, except one. The middle shelf had been cleaned. Someone had removed several books. Only their clean outlines remained. Nathaniel stepped toward the desk. An oil lamp stood on its corner. Its flame had long since died, but when he touched the glass, it was still warm. Someone had been in this room. Not years ago, not yesterday, very recently. His eyes moved across the desk. There were no letters, no photographs, no family records, only a large leather-bound ledger. He opened it carefully. Every page had been torn out, every single one, except the last. On the final page, only 3 names remained: Elias Turner, Samuel Reed, Nathaniel Brooks. Nathaniel froze. His own name, written in faded ink. How? He had never been to Black Hollow. No one here should have known him. He looked more closely. Beside each name, someone had written a date. Elias Turner, October 17, 1858. Samuel Reed, October 17, 1873. Nathaniel Brooks. The space beneath his name was empty. No date. Not yet. A cold chill ran through him. Someone had expected him to come. Long before he had received the letter. Then, a clock somewhere inside the house began to strike. 1, 2, 3. Nathaniel counted every chime. When the 12th strike echoed through the silent rooms, he noticed something strange. The bookshelf beside him had moved, only an inch, but enough to reveal a narrow gap in the wall. Behind it, something was hidden, something no one had wanted to be found. Part 10: Behind the bookshelf. Nathaniel didn't move. The narrow gap behind the bookshelf was barely wide enough for a hand. He lifted the lantern. A faint draft of cold air escaped from the darkness beyond. This wasn't just a hidden compartment. It was a passage. He looked back toward the hallway. Silent. No footsteps. No voices. Only the distant wind, rubbing against the old windows. Nathaniel placed both hands on the bookshelf. It resisted at first. Then, with a deep, grinding sound, it slowly slid aside. Dust drifted through the lantern light. Behind it, a narrow stone staircase descended beneath the house. Nathaniel hesitated. The steps were carved from solid rock. Not wood, not brick, stone. Far older than the house itself. Whoever had built this passage had built it first. The house had come later. He stepped down carefully. One step, then another. The air grew colder. The smell of damp earth filled the tunnel. After nearly 30 steps, the staircase ended. A long underground corridor stretched into darkness. The walls were reinforced with heavy oak beams. Someone had invested enormous time and money to build this place. Nathaniel raised the lantern. Something on the floor caught his attention. A line of footprints, fresh. The dust had been disturbed only hours before. Someone else was down here. He followed the tracks. The corridor ended at a heavy iron door. Unlike everything else in the tunnel, the hinges were clean. The lock had no rust. Someone opened this door. Again and again, Nathaniel reached for the handle. Turned easily. The room beyond was nothing like he expected. There were no chains, no skeletons, no signs of violence. Instead, the room looked like an office. A large wooden table stood in the center. Maps covered one wall. Shelves held dozens of leather-bound journals. Everything was arranged with perfect care, as though someone had been working here until very recently. Nathaniel stepped closer. One journal lay open. Its ink was still fresh. Only a single sentence had been written. "He has finally arrived." Nathaniel stared at the page. Slowly, very slowly, he reached out to touch it. The ink stained his fingertip. It wasn't decades old. It hadn't even dried. Someone had written those words only minutes earlier. Then, a chair scraped across the stone floor. Not in front of him, behind him. Nathaniel turned instantly. The room was empty. The lantern trembled in his hand. Another sound followed. Not a footstep, not a whisper. The heavy iron door was slowly beginning to close, and this time, someone was pulling it shut. Part 11, the name no one remembered. The iron door slammed shut. The sound echoed through every corner of the underground chamber. Nathaniel rushed toward it. He pulled the heavy handle. It didn't move. He pushed with all his strength. Nothing. Someone had locked it from the outside. He took a slow breath. Panic would solve nothing. He lifted the lantern. The room became clearer. It was larger than he had first believed. Dust covered the stone floor, but not everywhere. A narrow path led from the door to the far side of the chamber. Someone had walked here again and again. Nathaniel followed the path. Against the back wall stood a large wooden cabinet. Its doors were slightly open. Inside, hundreds of neatly labeled files rested on old shelves. Every file carried a person's name. Every name belonged to someone from Black Hollow. Nathaniel removed the first folder. Margaret Collins. Inside was a photograph, a birth certificate, several newspaper clippings, and one handwritten note. Left town on October 18, 1879. He opened another. William Harper. The same. A photograph. Personal records. Another note. Never returned. Nathaniel's heartbeat grew faster. These weren't random documents. Someone had been watching every person who entered or left Black Hollow. For decades, he reached for another file. His hands froze. The name on the cover read, Elias Turner. The same name, engraved inside the silver pocket watch. Nathaniel carefully opened the folder. Inside, he found an old photograph. It showed Elias standing outside the house. He wasn't smiling. He looked worried, as though he already knew something terrible was about to happen. Behind the photograph lay a folded newspaper. The date caught Nathaniel's attention. October 20th, 1858. The headline read, "Local schoolmaster disappears without a trace." Nathaniel frowned. The article described Elias Turner as a respected schoolteacher, 36 years old, married, father of 2 children. The search for him had lasted 12 days. Nothing had ever been found. Nathaniel looked back at the photograph. The newspaper claimed Elias had vanished forever, yet someone had carefully kept his records, hidden beneath the house. Why? He turned over the photograph. A short sentence had been written on the back. He learned the truth. Nothing more. No explanation. Nathaniel slipped the photograph into his coat. Just then, he noticed something else. One shelf had an empty space. A thick layer of dust covered every file around it, except one. Someone had removed a folder very recently. The clean outline was impossible to miss. Nathaniel leaned closer. A tiny paper label still clung to the edge of the shelf. Only half the name remained. Brooks. His heart skipped a beat. There was only one Brooks connected to this mystery. Someone had taken his file before he arrived. Then, a voice echoed softly from the other side of the locked iron door. Calm, clear, almost welcoming. "Mr. Brooks, we've been expecting you." Nathaniel's hand tightened around the lantern. For the first time, the mystery had spoken his name. Part 12. The man behind the door. Nathaniel stood perfectly still. The voice had been calm, not threatening, not frightened, almost expecting him. His fingers tightened around the lantern. "Who are you?" he called. For several long seconds, no answer came, only the quiet hiss of the lantern flame. Then, the same voice returned. "You've been asking the wrong questions." Nathaniel stepped closer to the iron door. "What do you mean?" Another silence. Then, "You came here looking for the house." A pause. "But the house was never the mystery." Nathaniel frowned. "What is the mystery?" The man laughed quietly, a tired laugh, one that carried years of regret. "The people." Nathaniel's heartbeat slowed. The people? Every person who arrived in Black Hollow believed the house was hiding something. They were all wrong. Nathaniel looked around the underground room. The journals, the maps, the files. Nothing here suggested madness. Everything had been organized with remarkable care. He returned his attention to the door. "If you know the truth, open the door." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm locked in here too." Nathaniel's expression changed. "What?" "I've never been outside this tunnel. Not in 23 years. The words echoed in Nathaniel's mind. 23 years. It seemed impossible. "Who locked you inside?" The answer came almost immediately. "The same people who invited me here." Nathaniel felt a chill. "You received a letter?" "Yes, the very same letter. If the light still burns, do not knock on the door." Nathaniel unfolded the faded paper from his pocket. The handwriting matched every curve, every stroke. Exactly. Someone had copied it again and again for decades. "Tell me your name," Nathaniel said. Silence. Then, "My name doesn't matter anymore." "It does to me." Another long pause. Finally, "My name is Samuel Reed." Nathaniel's eyes widened. Samuel Reed, the second name, written inside the ledger upstairs. The man who had supposedly disappeared in 1873. You've been alive all this time? Yes. Then why has no one searched for you? They did. They searched the house. They searched the forest. They searched the river. Another pause. But they never searched beneath their own feet. Nathaniel looked slowly around the hidden chamber. The tunnel, the office, the records, the forgotten staircase, an entire world hidden beneath Black Hollow. Then something caught his eye. On the stone floor, near the far wall, a faint line of fresh mud. Someone else had entered this room very recently. The footprints were larger than Nathaniel's. They crossed the chamber, stopped beside the journals, and disappeared into complete darkness. Nathaniel raised the lantern. Its light reached only a few feet farther. Beyond that, nothing, only blackness. Then, a single drop of water fell from the ceiling. Nathaniel looked up. The ceiling was dry. Another drop fell, not from above, from somewhere, deep inside the darkness ahead. Samuel's voice became urgent. "Don't move." Nathaniel froze. "Why?" For the first time, Samuel sounded afraid. "Because you're no longer alone." At that exact moment, a second lantern slowly came to life, far inside the tunnel. Someone had just lit it, and they were walking toward him. Part 13, The Keeper of the Lantern. The second lantern moved slowly through the darkness. Not hurried, not cautious. Whoever carried it already knew the way. Nathaniel instinctively lowered his own lantern. The warm glow became weaker. His breathing slowed. Every sound suddenly seemed louder. The distant drip of water, the faint crackle of the flame, the quiet beating of his own heart. The approaching lantern stopped, perhaps 30 feet away. The figure remained hidden in the shadows. Only the light could be seen. Samuel's voice came softly from behind the iron door. "Do not call out." Nathaniel whispered, "Who is it?" Samuel answered immediately, "I don't know." Nathaniel looked back at the door. "You've been here for 23 years. You should know everyone." A long silence followed. Then Samuel replied, "That's exactly why I'm afraid." Nathaniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I know every person in Black Hollow. The man carrying that lantern has never lived here." The words settled heavily in the tunnel. Nathaniel slowly turned back. The figure had moved again. One step, then another. The lantern rose slightly, illuminating a pair of polished black boots. Clean, expensive, nothing like the worn boots of a farmer or a miner. A dark overcoat came into view. Then, a leather glove. The stranger stopped once more. Still, his face remained hidden. Nathaniel spoke first. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks." No answer. "I'm a reporter from Boston." Silence. "I received a letter." The figure finally moved. Very slowly, he raised his lantern higher, just enough for Nathaniel to see the lower half of his face, a neatly trimmed gray beard, thin lips, a faint scar running across his chin. The man looked to be in his 60s. He smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, simply as though he had been expecting this meeting. Then he spoke. His voice was calm. "You came one day earlier than I expected." Nathaniel felt a chill. "You were expecting me?" "Of course." "Who are you?" The stranger ignored the question. Instead, he looked at the silver pocket watch in Nathaniel's hand. "You found Elias Turner's watch." It wasn't a question. Nathaniel slowly nodded. "Yes." The man's smile disappeared. Then you've already made your first mistake. Nathaniel's grip tightened. What mistake? You picked up something that was never meant to leave the road. Before Nathaniel could respond, the stranger reached into his coat. He removed an old leather notebook. Its cover was cracked with age. He held it out. I believe this belongs to you. Nathaniel stared at the notebook. It looked almost identical to the one inside his own satchel. Slowly, he opened his bag. His notebook was gone. He hadn't heard anyone take it. He hadn't even felt the bag move. The stranger took one step closer. For the first time, the lantern illuminated his eyes. They were calm, patient, and strangely familiar. Then Nathaniel noticed something that made his blood run cold. Pinned neatly inside the man's coat was a small brass badge. Its engraving was still clear. Black Hollow Sheriff's Office. Nathaniel remembered the station master's words. Some questions should never be answered. He looked back at the badge. According to every town record, the last sheriff of Black Hollow had died 28 years earlier. Then the stranger quietly said, Mr. Brooks, before you decide whom to trust, you should know one thing. He glanced towards the locked iron door. Samuel Reed has been lying to you since the moment you arrived. The tunnel fell silent. Nathaniel looked at the stranger, then at the iron door. For the first time, he no longer knew which one of them was telling the truth. Part 14, The Truth Beneath Black Hollow. Nathaniel's eyes moved from the stranger to the iron door. Neither man spoke. Neither man looked away. The silence was becoming unbearable. Finally, Nathaniel broke it. You both know my name. He looked at Samuel's door. You say you've been trapped here for 23 years. Then he turned toward the stranger. And you claim he's been lying. He took a slow breath. So, which one of you is telling the truth? The stranger lowered his lantern. Neither. Nathaniel frowned. What? The truth, he said quietly, is far more complicated. He reached into his coat. This time, he removed a small iron key. It was old. Its surface was worn smooth by years of use. Without a word, he unlocked the iron door. The heavy lock clicked. The door slowly opened. Nathaniel immediately raised his lantern. Samuel Reed stood inside. He looked exactly as Nathaniel had imagined. Thin, gray-haired. His clothes were worn, but one detail didn't fit. His boots. They were clean, far too clean, for a man who claimed he had been trapped underground for 23 years. The stranger noticed Nathaniel's expression. You've finally seen it. Samuel looked down, then quietly smiled. I wondered when you'd notice. Nathaniel took one careful step backward. You could leave whenever you wanted. Samuel didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the wooden table. He placed both hands upon it, then looked directly at Nathaniel. I never said I couldn't leave. I said I never left. Nathaniel felt the meaning before he fully understood the words. You chose to stay? Samuel nodded. Yes. Why? Samuel looked around the hidden chamber, at the journals, the maps, the files. This place isn't a prison. It's an archive. Nathaniel frowned. An archive, the stranger answered. For 30 years, every important record, every confession, every secret has been brought here. Nathaniel looked at the endless shelves, the hundreds of files. Everything suddenly made sense. The house wasn't hiding treasure. It wasn't hiding bodies. It was hiding the truth. Samuel spoke again. Black Hollow was built by 3 families. They owned the mines, the forests, the railway. They controlled everything. When accidents happened, they changed the records. When workers died, they erased the names. When witnesses spoke, they disappeared. Nathaniel slowly remembered the empty spaces in the files, the missing photographs, the torn ledger. Someone had spent decades rewriting history. The stranger walked toward a large wall map. He pointed to a red line. "This tunnel doesn't end here." Nathaniel stepped closer. The red line continued far beneath the valley, past the church, past the station, past the abandoned mine. It stretched nearly 3 miles, then stopped beneath the old courthouse. Nathaniel looked at both men. "So this was never about the house?" Samuel slowly nodded. "No, it was always about what lies beneath the town." Just then, a loud bell echoed through the tunnel. Not 1 chime, not 2, but 3 rapid strikes. The stranger's face instantly changed. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. "They've found us." Nathaniel stared at him. "Who?" Before the stranger could answer, heavy footsteps echoed above them. Not 1 person, not 2, several. Walking across the floor of the house, someone had entered, and this time, they weren't searching for the truth. They were searching for Nathaniel Brooks. The Silent House at Black Hollow, 1888. Final part, The Letter That Returned. 3 months had passed since Nathaniel Brooks left Black Hollow. The story he published changed everything. The powerful families who had controlled the town for decades lost their influence. Old records were reopened. Hidden names were restored. And for the first time in many years, the people of Black Hollow could speak freely. But Nathaniel could not forget the house, the underground tunnels, the hidden records, and the final message that made him the keeper of the record. He returned to Boston. He continued writing, but every night, before sleeping, he checked the same thing, the old letter, the letter that started everything. If the light still burns, do not knock on the door. He kept it locked inside his desk, until one rainy evening, a new envelope arrived. No sender, no address, just like before. Nathaniel stared at it for several minutes. He already knew, before opening it, what was inside. His hands slowly unfolded the paper. Only 1 sentence was written. "The light has returned." Nathaniel felt the room grow colder. Impossible. The house was empty. The records were safe. The truth had been revealed, or so he believed. The next morning, he checked the newspaper. A small article near the bottom of the page caught his attention. "Unknown light seen in abandoned Black Hollow house." Nathaniel read the article twice. Then he looked at the date. October 17th, 1888. Exactly 30 years after Elias Turner's disappearance. He closed the newspaper. Something had been missed. One final piece of the mystery. That evening, Nathaniel opened the old journal again. The journal that had been hidden beneath Black Hollow. Most pages were filled with names, dates, secrets, but one page had always been blank. Until now, slowly, new words appeared, not by magic, not by anything impossible. The ink was simply revealed because a hidden message had been written beneath the original page. Nathaniel held it under the lamp. And read the sentence. "The keeper protects the truth, but the keeper must never believe he knows everything." Below the message was one final name, a name Nathaniel had never seen before. Thomas Brooks, his own father. Nathaniel froze. His father had always told him he had never visited Black Hollow. He had always said he knew nothing about the town, but hidden inside the journal was proof his father had been there 30 years earlier. Nathaniel returned to Black Hollow one final time. The house still stood. The windows were broken. The doors were open, but the golden light was gone. Inside the study, he found something waiting on the old desk. A photograph taken in 1858. Elias Turner, Samuel Reed, the old sheriff, and standing beside them, a young man, barely 20 years old. Nathaniel lifted the picture closer. The young man's face was unmistakable. It was his father. On the back of the photograph, for words were written, "The first keeper." Nathaniel looked around the silent house. For 30 years, everyone believed the mystery belonged to Black Hollow. But the truth was different. Black Hollow was never searching for a stranger. It was waiting for the son of the man who started everything. Nathaniel placed the photograph back on the desk. Then he slowly walked away. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The old house remained silent, but high above, in the same window where the light had first appeared, a small golden glow returned. Not a warning, not an invitation, a reminder. Some secrets are not buried because they are forgotten. They are buried because someone must protect them. And somewhere, in the quiet hills of America, the story of Black Hollow was still waiting for the next person brave enough to discover the truth.